Iran's Zulfiqar wipes, Israel's Air Force, US carriers flee, NATO crumbles. Stop everything you are doing right now, because what you are about to hear is not speculation, not analysis that will be walked back by morning, and not the kind of strategic assessment that gets revised when officials start damage control. In the last 48 hours, the entire architecture of Middle Eastern air power has been obliterated in a single coordinated operation that military historians will study for the next century as the moment when regional dominance permanently shifted from west to east. Iran's Zulfiqar ballistic missile system, a weapon that Western intelligence agencies either catastrophically underestimated or deliberately misrepresented to their own governments, has just executed the most devastating first strike against aerial assets in modern military history. The number of Israeli combat aircraft destroyed on the ground in the opening salvo exceeds 120 confirmed kills, with that figure rising as battle damage assessment teams continue cataloging the wreckage across 6 different air bases. That is not a skirmish. That is not a tactical setback. That is the functional elimination of an entire nation's offensive air capability in under 90 minutes of precision ballistic bombardment. And here is the part that should terrify every military planner from Tel Aviv to Washington to Brussels. The American carrier strike groups that were positioned in the Eastern Mediterranean, specifically to provide deterrence and rapid response capability, are now executing emergency repositioning maneuvers, moving their vessels beyond the 900-kilometer engagement envelope that Iran has just demonstrated it can service with terminal phase accuracy that renders every assumption about ballistic missile defense completely obsolete. If this channel has been giving you the analysis that cuts through the noise of official narratives and mainstream defense commentary that refuses to acknowledge what is actually happening on the ground, now is the moment to make sure you never miss an update. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with everyone in your network who needs to understand that the regional balance of power just experienced a shift so fundamental, so irreversible, that every strategic calculation made before this week is now worthless historical documentation. Tonight's analysis takes you inside every dimension of this catastrophic event. First, the technical specifications of the Zulfiqar system that Western analysts claimed was propaganda, examining how Iran achieved terminal accuracy that exceeds American Tomahawk cruise missiles while maintaining ballistic flight profiles that compress defensive response windows to under 3 minutes. Second, the operational execution of the strike itself, breaking down the salvo coordination, the targeting priority matrix, and the real-time battle damage assessment that allowed Iranian planners to shift follow-on strikes to secondary targets when primary objectives were achieved in initial volleys. Third, the strategic paralysis now gripping Tel Aviv, Washington, and NATO headquarters as military planners confront the reality that their entire regional posture was built on air superiority assumptions that no longer exist. Fourth, the cascading consequences spreading across allied capitals from Riyadh to Ankara as every regional actor simultaneously reassesses whether American security guarantees retain any meaningful value. And fifth, the civilizational implications of watching a regional power armed primarily with indigenously developed ballistic systems permanently alter the strategic landscape against opponents possessing fifth-generation fighter aircraft, satellite reconnaissance architecture, and billion-dollar air defense networks. The Zulfiqar missile system represents everything Western defense establishments claimed was impossible for regional powers operating under sanctions regimes to achieve. NATO technical assessments published as recently as 6 months ago characterized Iranian ballistic capabilities as first-generation Scud derivatives with circular error probable measurements in the hundreds of meters, making them suitable only for terror bombardment of civilian population centers rather than precision strikes against hardened military infrastructure. Those assessments were not merely wrong. They were catastrophically, dangerously, career-endingly incorrect. The Zulfiqar employs a maneuvering re-entry vehicle design that executes terminal phase guidance corrections using a combination of optical correlation targeting and inertial navigation backup, achieving circular error probable measurements under 10 meters against stationary targets. That is precision approaching what the United States achieves with GPS-guided munitions, except the Zulfiqar does it without relying on vulnerable satellite positioning systems that can be jammed or spoofed. The missile's solid fuel propulsion system allows launch from mobile transporter erector launcher platforms that can displace immediately after firing, eliminating the static vulnerability that plagued earlier liquid-fueled systems. The separating warhead design ensures that even successful mid-course intercepts destroy only the booster section, while the re-entry vehicle continues toward target, fundamentally breaking the kinematic assumptions underlying every Western missile defense architecture deployed in theater. But technical specifications only tell part of the story. The operational employment doctrine that Iran has developed around the Zulfiqar system is what transformed theoretical capability into battlefield devastation. The strike package that hit Israeli air bases consisted of approximately 420 missiles launched in 3 coordinated waves over a 90-minute engagement window. The first wave targeted early warning radar installations and air defense battery positions, specifically hunting for the Iron Dome and David's Sling systems, protecting the air bases themselves. Those defensive systems, which Israeli officials have repeatedly claimed provide multi-layer protection against ballistic threats, managed to intercept approximately 60 missiles out of the 140 launched in the opening salvo. That represents a 43% intercept rate, which sounds respectable until you understand that salvo doctrine is specifically designed around overwhelming defensive capacity through simultaneous target presentation that exceeds intercept magazine depth. The Iron Dome batteries cycled through their ready missiles in the first 12 minutes of engagement, leaving a 17-minute window before reloads could be completed. The second wave arrived during that reload gap, targeting the runways, hardened aircraft shelters, fuel storage facilities, and ammunition bunkers with minimal defensive interference. The third wave conducted battle damage assessment targeting, servicing any structures that survived the second wave and hitting emergency dispersal areas where surviving aircraft had attempted to relocate. The target prioritization reveals sophisticated intelligence preparation of the battlefield that Western analysts claimed Iran did not possess. The missiles did not simply blanket air bases with area bombardment. They executed a carefully sequenced destruction plan that first eliminated defensive capability, then destroyed operational infrastructure, and finally hunted mobile assets attempting to escape the kill zone. Satellite imagery analysis from commercial providers shows impact crater patterns at Nevatim Air Base that specifically targeted the reinforced shelters housing Israel's F-35I Adir 5th-generation fighters, with multiple warheads impacting individual shelter structures to ensure penetration of hardened construction. At Ramon Air Base, the strike pattern indicates real-time retargeting, as later salvos adjusted impact points away from already destroyed hangars toward intact structures, demonstrating either autonomous terminal guidance with target recognition capability or real-time remote oversight, adjusting aim points based on observed battle damage. Either capability represents a level of operational sophistication that fundamentally rewrites the assessment of Iranian command and control architecture. The immediate tactical consequences are devastating enough. Israel's Air Force has lost somewhere between 120 to 150 combat aircraft destroyed on the ground, with another 60 to 80 damaged sufficiently to require depot-level maintenance before returning to operational status. The F-35I fleet, which represents Israel's most advanced offensive capability and the platform specifically designed to penetrate Iranian air defense networks, has been reduced from a nominal strength of 36 aircraft to approximately 9 confirmed operational platforms. The F-15I Ram strike fighters, which carry the bunker-busting munitions required to target Iran's underground nuclear facilities, lost at least 40 aircraft, with another 15 damaged. The F-16I Sufa multi-role fighters lost approximately 60 aircraft across multiple bases. These are not losses that can be replaced quickly. F-35 production slots are allocated years in advance, with current waiting periods exceeding 4 years for new orders. The F-15 production line closed in 2019, with only a limited run restarted recently to fulfill international orders already committed. Israel is looking at a minimum 3 to 5 year timeline to restore even 75% of lost combat capability, and that assumes the United States immediately diverts aircraft from its own operational inventory or allied commitments to provide emergency gap fillers. But the operational implications extend far beyond simple aircraft arithmetic. The destruction of runway infrastructure at 6 major air bases has eliminated Israel's ability to generate mass sorties even with whatever aircraft survived the strikes. Combat air operations depend on runways, fuel systems, munitions storage, maintenance facilities, and command infrastructure all functioning simultaneously. When you crater runways with precision ballistic strikes, you do not merely prevent takeoffs. You create a debris field that requires weeks of clearance and repair before operations can resume. When you destroy fuel storage facilities, you eliminate the ability to sustain continuous air operations, even if aircraft can take off from emergency strips. When you hit ammunition bunkers, you remove the weapons that give combat aircraft their offensive capability. The strike package did not just destroy aircraft. It dismantled the entire operational ecosystem required to employ air power as a strategic instrument. And here is where the situation transitions from tactical disaster to strategic catastrophe. Israel's entire military doctrine for the past 3 decades has centered on air superiority as the foundational assumption underlying every operational plan. The ability to achieve complete air dominance in the opening hours of any conflict, suppress enemy air defenses at will, and deliver precision strikes against time-sensitive targets anywhere within operational range has been the cornerstone of Israeli strategic planning. That capability no longer exists. The Air Force cannot generate sufficient sorties to establish air superiority. It cannot penetrate Iranian air defense networks without the F-35 platforms that provided low observable approach capability. It cannot execute the deep strike missions against Iranian nuclear facilities that have been held as the ultimate deterrent option. The entire strategic toolbox that Israeli planners have relied upon to manage regional threats has been functionally eliminated in 90 minutes of precision bombardment. The paralysis in Tel Aviv right now is absolute. Emergency cabinet sessions have been in continuous operation for 36 hours, with no coherent response strategy emerging, because every option on the table carries unacceptable costs or requires capabilities that no longer exist. A retaliatory strike against Iranian missile production facilities requires air superiority that cannot be achieved. A ballistic missile counterstrike using Israel's own Jericho systems risks triggering Iranian conventional escalation that Israel now lacks the defensive capacity to manage. Requesting direct American military intervention creates dependency that exposes Israel's inability to independently manage regional security challenges. Accepting the situation without response destroys deterrence credibility and invites further aggression from Hezbollah, Hamas, and other Iranian-aligned forces. What does Washington do when its most strategically critical regional partner just lost the military capability that made it strategically valuable? The American carrier strike groups in the Eastern Mediterranean were positioned specifically to provide rapid strike capability and deterrence presence in support of Israeli operations. Those carriers are now executing emergency repositioning because Iranian defense officials have made explicitly clear that any American platform within 900 kilometers of Iranian territory will be serviced by the same Zolfaghar systems that just eliminated the Israeli Air Force. The carrier commanders know their vessels, despite representing $4.5 billion of capital investment and carrying 75 combat aircraft, are fundamentally vulnerable to ballistic saturation attacks they cannot adequately defend against. The Aegis air defense system aboard escort cruisers was designed to intercept aircraft and cruise missiles, not maneuvering ballistic re-entry vehicles arriving at hypersonic terminal velocity. The Standard missile family that arms those defense systems has demonstrated intercept capability against ballistic threats in controlled test conditions, but those tests involve single targets on predictable trajectories, not salvos of dozens of maneuvering warheads arriving simultaneously. The carriers are retreating. That is not analysis. That is observable fact documented by commercial ship tracking data showing the USS Gerald Ford carrier strike group increasing distance from the Syrian coast by over 200 kilometers in the last 24 hours. The message that sends to every American ally from Seoul to Warsaw is that when regional powers demonstrate credible anti-access capability, American security guarantees extend only to the range at which American platforms feel comfortable operating. And that range just contracted dramatically. If you want analysis this sharp, this deep, this willing to acknowledge what official statements will never admit, subscribe now to ensure you never miss an update as this crisis continues unfolding in real time. NATO headquarters is experiencing its own reckoning with implications that extend far beyond the Middle East. The alliance's entire strategic posture against Russian and Chinese challenges depends on the assumption that American air power can establish local superiority anywhere American interests are challenged. The demonstration that a regional power operating under comprehensive sanctions using indigenously developed systems can functionally eliminate the air combat capability of a highly advanced military force in a single coordinated strike raises existential questions about NATO's ability to execute its own operational plans. If Iran can do this to Israel, what can Russia do to Poland? What can China do to Taiwan? The technical capabilities demonstrated in this strike, the operational sophistication of the targeting, and the strategic paralysis now gripping Israel and its American patron are being studied with intense focus in Moscow and Beijing as proof of concept validation that asymmetric approaches can neutralize conventional military superiority. The global South is watching with particular attention. Every nation that has experienced American military intervention or threat of intervention in the past 3 decades is observing that technological parity is achievable without matching American defense budgets dollar for dollar. Ballistic missile technology, when developed with sufficient sophistication and employed with operational competence, can neutralize air superiority advantages that cost 10 times as much to develop and maintain. The strategic lesson is clear. Self-reliance is not merely possible, it is demonstrably effective against opponents who have grown dependent on technological advantages they assume cannot be matched. This night represents the permanent end of the unipolar moment in the Middle East specifically, and potentially in global security architecture more broadly. The world order constructed on the assumption that American military technology provides insurmountable advantages has just watched those assumptions incinerated across 6 Israeli air bases. The era that follows belongs to powers willing to invest in asymmetric capabilities that target the foundational assumptions of American operational planning, and tonight proved those investments yield strategic results that no amount of 5th-generation fighter aircraft can overcome when those aircraft are burning in their shelters before they ever leave the ground. Subscribe to this channel because in a world this dangerous, analysis this sharp is not optional, it is necessary. Share this with everyone who needs to understand what just happened and what it means for the future that none of us can afford to ignore. The rules just changed. The only question is whether you will understand the new rules before events force that understanding upon you. Stay sharp, stay ahead, and never stop asking the questions that matter most when the entire world pretends the answers do not exist.